The driver clicked the doors to lock, and that sound made her realize that the doors couldn't be unlocked from the back seat. Shivers began to go up and down her spine. She questioned the driver, and he said something about it being a child safety feature. The night is dark and the rain had been falling for an hour. Stacy goes on the app and gets a ride from one of those driving services. She waits outside under the streetlight. The restaurant had closed late tonight and her car was in the shop, so she had been catching a ride into work with Joe. Joe had to leave early, so this was her only way home. Stacy didn't really like doing that late by herself, but she didn't have any other choice. 15 minutes later, the described car pulled up. The driver was male in his late 20s to early 30s. The car had the usual Uber logo sticker on it, and this one had a red K on it as well. She had no idea what that meant, but thought they wouldn't be driving if they weren't trustworthy. She was so tired, and her feet hurt so badly, she didn't notice the pictures or the smell at first. She got in, made sure he had her correct address, put on her seatbelt, and they were off. The driver clicked the doors to lock, and that sound made her realize that the doors couldn't be unlocked from the back seat. Shivers began to go up and down her spine. She questioned the driver, and he said something about it being a child safety feature. Stacy didn't believe him, and her uneasy feeling was growing. It was then that she noticed all of the pictures of the women up and around the front visors of the car. They all looked remarkably similar to her. The driver said they were pictures of the people he drove around at night, and then he would show their picture to his daughter Sally and tell their stories. Stacy was not sure about that, and then she realized what that smell was. Bleach. Her mom would come home smelling like that after working in the hospital. The driver sprayed something towards her, making her dizzy. She passed out for a few minutes. When she came to, she was still in the car with the driver under an underpass in a completely deserted part of town. There were 4 brown paper bags in front of her with numbers on them. The driver awoke her by screaming at her, jolting her awake again. "Pick," he demanded. "What? Where are we? This isn't my house. Let me go." Stacy began furiously jiggling the door, but it wouldn't budge. "Pick," he demanded again more firmly. He put a gun to her face. "Pick. We're playing a game. You must pick a bag. You ever play Clue? I'm giving you one answer. I'm the killer. You will determine the where and method, but whatever bag you choose. Now pick, or I will find the house you grew up in and kill everyone in it." "No. Would you like for me to start with your brother or sister?" Stacy's hand trembled and fear welled up inside of her, but she was too terrified for her family not to comply. "Bag 3, she whispered. Louder. Bag 3. "Ah, lots of work for me, but you will live a little longer." He opened up the bag and read the card. Place. The underpass at 4th Street. That's where we are right now. And the weapon will be... He reached into the bag and pulled out a knife that gleamed in the moonlight. Stacy screamed, but was never seen again. 2 nights later, another blonde woman, Jennifer, went missing. She suffered a similar fate as Stacy, only was killed in the park by the pond with a wrench. After 7 women with blonde hair had gone missing, the police called in the FBI. The murders had all looked like separate crimes at first because they had different weapons and locations, but then locations and weapons began to repeat themselves. Fear had taken over the women with blonde hair in the city. They all began dyeing their hair other colors, at least for the present time. The connection was also made that they all had blonde hair and had used the apps on their phones to get rides home. From there, they narrowed it down to the company, and finally, after a lot of legwork, a specific driver only took blonde passengers. The police and FBI had talked it over and decided to let someone go undercover. They had found the K car. They put a tracker on it secretly while the driver went in to get his coffee. Then they wired an agent, made sure she had what she needed, and she went on the app, getting her ride. Nicolette, the private investigator, had put a lot of criminals away, very dangerous criminals. She was still nervous. This driver had already killed several women in many different ways. The way he killed with ease scared her. Nicolette mustered her courage as the car appeared. with the K on it. She hit her button to confirm that this was indeed the right driver and the right car. Plainclothes detectives followed her from a distance to keep her safe, but also try and catch him. Nicolette got into the car and noticed a strange smell which she identified as bleach. That was an odd smell for a car. She saw the pictures in the car and guessed they were pictures of his victims. She tried to snap a few pictures of them and send them to her partner. Parts of them were blurry, but some were very clear. The driver made small talk and Nicolette tried to act normal. She was getting more anxious with every minute that went by. Her heart began to pound faster and faster. Then as they got closer to the edge of town, the driver sprayed something in the back of the car. Before she passed out, Nicolette hit her panic button. Pick. Nicolette was awakened by the driver yelling at her, giving her the same choice as he had given the other women. Nicolette was shocked and horrified as he explained the terrifying rules of his sadistic version of Clue to her. At the apartment she had set for her cover, there were a couple of plainclothes officers playing her friends pretending to be living with her. The driver mentioned them. She shook. She also knew that she had hit her panic button before passing out, and her backup should have already been there. Nicolette asked the driver, trying to stall him and distract him from his sick goal. She felt behind her and realized that her panic button was gone and that she no longer felt the wire she'd been wearing. "Looking for these?" the driver asked, holding up the box with her buttons and the wire. Nicolette thought quickly and pressed the record button on her phone. She tried to keep the driver talking, but his mind had turned back to his task. "Pick a bag," he said rather insistently. Seeing now that she needed to keep stalling until she could come up with her own plan, Nicolette relented and picked bag 1. The driver smiled wickedly and pulled out the card. "Again, I'm giving you one part for free as I am the killer. The place you pick is the Smithville Cemetery. That's where we are now. The method is boring, but it is what you picked, so I have to stick to the rules of the game as well," the driver said, reaching in the bag and pulling out a syringe. "You have chosen drugs, my dear." Without really giving her time to react, the driver lunged at Nicolette with a needle. It pierced her skin, but she wrestled away from the driver before he could inject her with a full dose of whatever was in there. She kept wrestling with the driver and finally got the syringe from him, jabbing it into his arm, causing him to lose focus. Nicolette was able to make it to the front seat, open the door, and crawl a short distance from the car before the full effect of the drugs overcame her. The police, FBI, and paramedics showed up shortly after that. Nicolette had gotten the entire event on her phone. They took her to the hospital where they discovered that she had been injected with a strong sedative. The dose she received was not enough to kill her, but there were 3 other syringes full of the same sedative in the bag labeled number 1, and all of those together would have killed her. The driver was arrested, tried and convicted, and received life without parole. This was one of those cases that would stick with her for a long time.